Hey everyone, welcome to Exiles. This is a Gospel of Mark podcast, and we're coming to you from Grace Church in Erie, Pennsylvania, where we are taking what we learn about ancient truths and the person of Jesus into our everyday life. So I encourage you to check out whoisgrace.com/Mark for the sermon and other resources that we're using for our conversation today. So thanks for joining us. We're in season 3, actually, and this section of Mark is called The Jesus Way, and we'll be in this until July. So buckle up for that. We're following Jesus through Galilee as he continues his teaching and healing work while training his disciples and facing down the opposition. And if you're confused by the voice, I am not Danielle.
You are not.
I am not. We love Danielle, and she is the best, but you're going to have to put up with some subs for a few weeks while
different voices.
Danielle's taking a much-needed rest and sabbatical for a little bit. And so my name is Sarah. I'm one of the pastors here at Grace, and I have the privilege and honor of sitting in Danielle's seat today and hosting along with the cast, but we have kind of an unusual cast today. So why don't we start with the other two guests today before we get to the regular. Tell me who you are.
Go ahead, Sammy.
Oh, me first. I thought we were just going to. Okay.
Oh, sure.
Who are you? What do you do?
I am Samantha, a.k.a. Sammy. And so I am the worship experience lead here at Grace Church. So I'm excited to be back today.
Yeah, you've been here a few times.
I've never heard you introduce yourself as Samantha.
I always introduce myself as Samantha.
Oh, okay.
But yet I don't then tell people, but don't call me that.
I feel like you have a complicated relationship with your name.
I do. I need
like
to figure
Sammy.
that out.
Should we
Only
unpack
like
that?
31 years later, and something's got to happen.
I like Sammy. It's a whole one syllable shorter than Samantha. It's just that much easier to say.
Thank you.
Especially on
Sammy,
a podcast.
Sam. My middle name is Joe, so some people call me Sammy Joe. I think that's why they gave me the
cute.
name.
Sammy Joe. Wow.
Yeah, so not a lot of people call me that. So
Oh, well.
that's
That's a big
open
Erie
for
thing, too.
grabs.
Isn't that a big Erie
you
thing?
go.
Like having a second name after like the first female name. Like my aunt's Mary Jo, for example. Or putting like Joe after the name, or I don't know. That's a big Erie thing. I feel.
Okay.
So,
Starting a
anyways,
trend.
that kind of
Okay.
goes into my.
Oh, you have a second
Opening.
name too, but we
I
can get to
do.
that. Go ahead, Rob. Go
I
ahead.
have so many. We reviewed that.
What's that?
Last week?
So many
the
what?
phases of your name.
Oh, yeah.
Share this.
Introduce yourself and
Do
tell
we really
the
want to
people.
get into
Yes,
this?
do
Oh, my
it.
gosh.
Good.
Okay.
Start
Everyone
with
wants
who
to
you
know.
were as a newborn babe.
Well, sure. Well, first of all, my name is currently Rob right now. But so yeah, we were kind of joking recently how I've determined I have phases of my name. So I started out as a Robbie back in that was like from birth until middle school. And I realized I needed to mature and become a Rob in like end of middle school, early high school. We're still in that phase, but I figured once we get to 45, I become Robert. That's like a step up in maturity. Sounds more professional, I feel like. And then once you get to I don't know, 75, 80, it's Bob.
That's wow.
It's Bob.
It's so true, though.
Yep.
That was my grandpa. So
Yeah, same
that's your future.
The first time I
Something
heard
to
it's
look
like the
forward
evolution of a Robert, I feel like is what that is. The first time I heard you say
The
that, I
evolution of
laughed
Rob.
so hard.
Oh.
What happens to the Bobbies though? Did they
Oh.
were they
Yeah,
the
true.
rebe-
Oh, no.
the
I feel
rebels?
I feel like
Yes.
that's
Why
a
is that?
whole different. That's a whole different thing.
Why is there
So
something
who-
associated with that name? Like a rebel. Like Bobby is a rebel.
Yeah.
Like I feel the same way too.
Bobby Knight.
Sorry
maybe
to all the Bobbies
maybe those are
listening out
like the
there.
80-year-old
Bobby.
bikers or something like
Oh
that.
Bikers.
He's Bobby.
But who does Bobby become then?
I don't know.
If Robbie becomes
Bobbert.
Bobbert. Oh my gosh.
Bobbert.
Oh my gosh.
All right.
All right. Moving on. Okay. So we've completely derailed this, but you're the veteran. Get us back
Oh,
on
no,
track.
there is no rails. There are no rails. I'm Steven. As people know, I'm feeling lonely, but also, I like having you guys here.
Yeah.
I think. I'll let you know at the end of the
Give a
podcast.
thumbs up or a thumbs down.
I thought he was going to confess
we wrap
to
this up.
something deep there.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
feeling lonely.
No, he's missing his regular crew.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not Danielle. I'm a different Sarah. Mike's not here. Yeah, it's rough. It's rough. Okay. I have an icebreaker to get us warmed up to practice having conversation, if
do
that's
it.
okay. So today is the last day of May as we record this. And so we are looking forward into summer. And I just want to know what kind of summer person you are. And
Oh.
you may interpret
Kind of
that
summer
question
person.
to your little heart's content. But what kind of summer person are you? And you can go with your ideal summer or not. I don't care how you answer.
I am a drive with the windows down only in the summer.
Yeah.
Oh, guy. That's a good way to start.
I can get
Yes.
behind that.
No AC allowed in the summer unless it's raining.
What?
Yes. And I'm only speaking in cars, by the way, too. I have to have AC in my home, of course, but driving around, no AC allowed. That's
Love
my
it.
rule.
So you're the guy rolling up at the light with like music blasting because your windows are
down, music up is the rule.
Well, what music?
Oh, in the summer, I like a lot of like EDM music and then also like rock and roll, like classic rock. I don't know why that combination, but it's very specific. Wow. That's what I go with.
All right. That was a great answer.
It was a really
And now
good
I
answer.
sprung that on you. You didn't even have time to prepare for that.
Starting off strong.
Good
That's
job,
my goal.
Oh, wow.
I'm a little bit nervous, guys.
On that. On that.
Oh, that's good. Okay. What kind of summer person are you, Steven, Sammy?
When I think
ahead,
of
Steven.
when I think of summer, this is not necessarily the type of person I am, but when I think of summer, I think of soccer. So I would like to play more soccer maybe in the summer, but I don't. But that's where my brain goes. Maybe back in the day playing. So we used to go to Edinburgh. Obviously, I'm from Scotland, so we used to go to Edinburgh. I lived about 30 minutes from Edinburgh growing up. It's the capital city of Scotland. And Arthur's Seat is a big old mountain right in the middle of Edinburgh. And at the bottom of it, it's kind of like a park, and there's a bunch of soccer fields. So my buddies and I would hang out there, and like the palace was right there, and then up the hill was the castle, and all that fun stuff. So,
Yeah.
But those are my memories.
You're not going to find a scene quite like that in Edinburgh, Pennsylvania.
No,
But
but, I moved from one Edinburgh to another. So.
So is that like the sport over there? Like the big
Soccer.
sport?
Oh yeah, that's the sport.
But it's like it's football over there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not
Oh.
soccer.
Yeah, it's either football or rugby.
he's accommodating us Americans by using the word soccer. So,
I know because
you know.
you guys make a big deal about
Yeah,
it every time
sorry.
I use the other one.
Thank you, Steven.
Not wrong.
You're welcome.
Sammy, what kind of summer girl are you?
So I love summer. So I'm the same as you in the way of I like having my windows down, but I play country music.
Oh, country's
I play it
good,
all
too.
the time, but
Like newer or older country?
both.
Oh, okay.
As long
Full
as there's
spectrum.
yes, full spectrum, as long as it's country in the car. I just have to be outside. I have to be in the sun. I have to be near water. I think I've learned I'm just meant to live near water in life all the time. I think when I moved to Erie years ago, living by water, then when I moved to Australia, there was water. Then I went to California, there was water. I'm like, I just have to have water. I have to look at it. I have to have the sun on me. So
It's good though. Like I can appreciate that. I don't think I've always
you.
lived by water too.
it's
Like living
great.
in I don't know if you're listening anywhere and you
Landlocked.
if you're landlocked, yeah,
Yeah.
let us know.
Yeah.
That'd be
Yeah. So if I were to ever live anywhere else besides Erie, I think
There need to be water.
I need water.
Like would a lake suffice? Like if you're I don't know in
Kansas, and there's a
Kansas.
lake.
there's a lot of cornfields.
middle.
there,
I
right?
mean, I could get by with that, but I do
Dakota,
like
North
the
Dakota.
idea of there's just no end.
So you like standing on the
water.
shore of Lake Erie and not being able to see the
Yes.
other
Can't see the end is the line.
I do. So like when I make summer plans, whether it's our family or with friends, and it's like, well, where are we gonna go in the summer? I'm like, obviously, water.
And
And there has to be. Yes,
Preferably
beachy.
beach and
Yes.
ocean. Okay.
Yes.
Really?
Okay.
Yes, Stephen. Yes.
It's like sitting down on the beach and doing nothing for 2 weeks.
He was tracking with you until right then.
You can read a
Ask
book.
my wife. It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Sand games. I don't know.
Bocce in
No,
the sand.
so I have lined up my summer in order to be by water,
Wow.
Yeah.
and not just Erie water,
All kinds.
all
Great.
kinds of water.
So speaking of water,
You
Sarah.
guys are great. Yeah. Speaking of water, I mean, I like
Oh,
water too.
what about you? Did you give your answer? Sorry.
I am a camping, hiking kind of summer girl. So as much of that as I can do, I can never get enough. I never feel like that bucket gets full enough. So
Is there a minimum, even though there's not a maximum?
that's a really good question. I mean, I literally try to schedule us to be able to camp 3 times between May and September. And that feels like a minimum to me. So we already lost our May opportunity because Memorial Day weekend was too wet for us to camp. So I'm already negative. But we went
Catching up.
hiking. And so that was kind of a makeup. So we'll see.
And you're a purist, right? For the people, you're not like a glamper. You're like a tent
no.
camper.
Yeah, we stay in a tent and we
Oh,
backpack
camper.
sometimes, you know, when you like carry everything on your back and go. But yeah, we don't have a camper and I'm not a glamper. But I am, this is funny. I am the kind of girl that would like, let's go sleep in the middle of the woods with nothing. or let's just go to a 5-star resort.
Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah.
No middle ground.
Yeah.
I'm not
appreciate
really,
that.
I don't like really need the middle. Anyway, but that's just because with Nate's work, we've gotten the opportunity to do some,
Fancy stuff.
some fancy stuff. And I'm like, I could get used to that.
Yeah,
But I also
yeah.
really love the woods. So,
You must not have had a bear experience yet then.
oh yeah.
You
Multiple in my
have?
life.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
we're going to have to save this
Multiple.
for podcast round 2.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jeez.
Multiple.
Bears,
Yeah.
bear experiences.
Yes, we've definitely had some bear experiences by myself and with
Oh, wow.
fam.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I need to know the story now, actually. Jeez.
No, it's all right. They're not, black bears are not nearly as aggressive as like if we were out west or.
She had to kill one, but it wasn't.
Yeah, my bare hands.
You're over there nodding. I was like, do you have an experience
I
as
don't.
well? Just like,
No. I wish I did, though.
grabbed it with my
I'll
bare
tell you about it
hands.
sometime.
That would
But
be a story to tell.
for now, let's talk about Mark.
All right.
Is that all right?
I love it.
Okay, so this is actually my sermon, which feels a little weird.
Yeah, it's
but
a little weird,
yeah, it's fine. So last week had the conversation around the first part of a 2-part because I was doing both. So developing Kingdom Vision Part 1 kind of left that one a little bit open at the end. Didn't really resolve like how exactly we develop Kingdom Vision. Just kind of left it with like disciples are failing. Right. And it's just fascinating that the way Mark orders his story, there's a story of Jesus healing a deaf and mute man, the disciples not getting it. They see him feed 5,000 and they're like, what? We don't know. Like there's just discipleship failure. And then today we see that Jesus heals a blind man. And so it's just a fascinating thing that like Mark is giving us clues to what we're supposed to be seeing, the blindness, the hard-headedness of the disciples. And so today we're going to talk a little bit more about like how we actually develop that kingdom vision. So when you guys read through like a chapter like Mark 8, where you see the disciples, like they experience the feeding of the 5,000, here they are again, and it's like they don't even notice what's happening, and Jesus has to be like, hey guys, what are we going to feed them? Disciples are like, oh, I don't know. What do you want to do? When you guys read stuff like that, do you empathize with the disciples? Do you move into like a posture of like judgment? Like what's your gut instinct when you're reading stories like those?
I mean, I'm like, oh, I get you. Like I was like, I live in that space. I mean, I do feel like I empathize because like even in my life, I feel like God has always proven himself faithful in every way. Like I'm still standing here today and he's come through on various different things, but I do find there's still that tendency sometimes to still look at a new scenario and be like, is it gonna happen this time? Is he gonna move? Is he gonna work? So like I can roll my eyes at myself along like with them. So I'm just like I'm there. I do understand that.
You easily see yourself in their story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's a little bit of both. Like, I think as readers or as myself reading it, it's so easy to point fingers sometimes reading like, wow, these idiots, Jesus is right in front of them right there, you know? And it's like so easy to be judgmental first, I think sometimes. But then it's like, wait, I do that too all the time. And I see so many other people doing it too. Like, it's crazy how Jesus is with us all the time too, and just as real in a lot of ways, and we still miss him frequently. And it's just as frustrating that we're missing him too, but it's humbling for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
So I feel the internal struggle of a farmer weekly preacher, because I think the farmer weekly preacher wants to default at making fun of the disciples,
Yep.
because you get a rise out of the people. So that's like where my brain goes naturally. But then I'm also reminded, like, I mean, we live that every day, you know, and that is our reality. I think one step further as well is that, you know, talking about the Syrophoenician woman last week, was that last week? 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Derek's. And just, you know, how she was out of the fold. I always think about how we're Gentiles unless we have Jewish descent, that we're also out of the fold. So we're like that extra layer, like removed as well. So that's where my brain goes. But I do, as a ex-weekly preacher, think about making fun of the disciples often, and then reminded that that's not necessarily fair, because my reality doesn't necessarily equal that.
Right. Yeah. And I'm like an oldest child, rule follower, mom, former teacher. And so all of that comes to play. And I'm like, guys, hello. But then quickly I do what you guys do as well and realize like, when have there been times when, so with the 5,000, I have gone to Jesus and like I've seen the need and I've gone to Jesus and been like, Jesus, I can't do this. Like, how is this going to happen? And then 2 years later, he's knocking on me and being like, hey, you're missing the opportunity for me to do this thing that you asked me to do before. Like, I want to do it again, but you're not. I'm like, oh, yep.
So that's an interesting thought.
Yep.
I mean, I'd be interested to hear others. So like, does time play a factor in your life sometimes? Or is it, you feel like pretty regular where you forget?
You first, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely relate to the whole like forgetting my past easily. Like it's always like on to the next, like future focus for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just actually, so one thing I started doing though was journaling, and I really realized that looking back from like you were saying, like a year or so ago, it's just amazing how faithful God was in those moments where I was like, how am I going to get through this? What's next? You know, how am I going to tackle all of this at one time type of thing? And it's just like, wow, like journaling really, really helps. And I was never a journaling guy either, but like now I put the stamp of approval on journaling.
Yeah.
Is there a desire to journal now? Like, where did that come from?
Definitely more of a desire. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's like I was saying, like I was really able to find that peace and joy by looking back and seeing, you know, where God has brought me, what he's done for me. And I think that's one thing as we're reading through this, like this, you clearly see the disciples doing that too, is just like easily forgetting like a healing that just happened and something like miraculous and incredible. And it's like, wow, like how, again, like it's easy to be like, wow, how can they forget something like that? But, you know, how many miracles is God working in our own lives, you know, that we might experience and then just move on from super quickly and just, yeah.
Yeah. I journal prayers. I've had time writing down thoughts, but I will journal prayers. And so there are occasions when I will pull the journal from a year or two or whatever ago. And like, I will read what I wrote 2 years ago before I journal what I'm praying like this year. And that's been really, I was prompted to do that a couple years ago when my dad almost died. And he was praying through that season. And then as we came up on like the first anniversary of him being in the hospital, I was like, you know what? What was I?
Let's go back. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just so good. It was so good. So I've kept it up.
I'm going to try that out.
Yeah.
I mean,
so just read them side by side.
Yeah. Well, I've done that more recently. So even in regards to the question of time, I feel like there's moments I'm in this battle of time sometimes, or like this, like seasons of life, you know, like, so even more recently, like I used to journal a lot, like a lot, not as much now, but I had felt prompted to actually go back to a lot of those journals and actually like take note of what were the things like I wrote out in faith or those prayers or what was happening in that season to fuel me in this vortex of time that I find myself in, still waiting for God to come through, or like fueling your belief that he's still at work. He's still going to come through. So I do feel the pressure of time sometimes, but I feel like those journals has helped me remember, like God has always been faithful. The things he did over the past year or so, like I need things like that to propel me forward. Like, so you don't get to the place where you do forget.
Yeah.
Like this Jesus is real. He does the things he says he's going to do. He's always alive. He's active. But it's like the fault in yourself where I'm like, okay, I need to remember. And now being thankful, I'm glad I actually wrote things when I did in order to keep me where I am today. So
This may be a dumb question, but I never thought about this till right now in this moment. But do you guys think the disciples ever journaled, like, and did the same thing and went back and like reread what they went through? Like, I don't know. I never thought about that. I know they wrote down like a lot of things, obviously, like that was like they recorded everything. But do you think they actually like journaled for themselves and went back and like re-looked at?
Got their smartphone out at night.
Take some notes.
Take some notes. That's a good, I don't know.
That's a good question. I mean, the Hebrew people, the Jewish people were more like literate than others because of their tradition and scrolls and their education and stuff like that. But I don't know. I guess like there's no that I can think of. No
nothing I know.
Clear evidence that somebody was actively doing. I mean, like the resources for writing things down would have been like harder to come by, more expensive, but maybe somebody was. I don't know the answer to that question, Rob.
Basically,
That's
we
great.
we need to go back in time and tell these
I
disciples to
know.
start journaling more, man. That's the answer.
You should have written more.
So I'm watching this show on Apple TV right now. So I have an elliptical in my basement. So I put on.
I could visualize you.
I put on a
I
show
did
as I
that
as I
too.
watch.
I was like-
as I whatever it is. It's like you're almost at sea. You know?
Yeah, it's like an undulations. Yeah.
It's called Dark Matter, and it's about this person that built like this cube that when you close the door, no elements can get into, and if you can suppress a certain part of your subconscious, you can actually essentially time travel. Or it's like this multiple universe reality. It's really fascinating. But saying the time
love stuff
traveling,
like that.
so like whatever your brain is thinking when you open up that door, you can step into that reality. It's a fascinating concept. Really, it's super
That is a
fascinating.
fascinating concept.
But anyway, that's your,
Wow. I
your
need to add this
time
to my
travel
list now.
comment.
Yeah, and time travel back to hang out with the disciples and let us know how that goes.
Yeah. So
I
go
know. I
build
mean-
build that cube.
That would be cool
That vibes with what we're saying, though,
Yeah.
in a way. Like, in terms of,
to remember.
yeah, because we easily get distracted, and the enemy's always at work, too. So it's like you're kind of being put in this position where so much is coming at you, and there's like this conscious decision to also remember and to just stay planted.
Yeah.
To like choose to immerse yourself in truth, in the word. And that's hard. But so that's a great visual of like
I'm gonna
a
walk in my
practicality of
box
it.
and
Walk in my box.
Locking
I'm
myself
gonna build
in this
myself a
spot.
big old cube. So the struggle I feel, and it actually goes to your point, Sammy. Like for whatever reason, maybe it's just the natural rebel in me or whatever, but I feel like I want to convince myself that God's not going to come through this time.
interesting.
So it's almost like, yeah, but God, you don't understand. Like this is a little bit bigger than the last one. And I find it's like this internal war sometimes with myself where I'm like, I know that. So when I'm interacting with somebody, maybe in a pastoral sense, I feel like I can defend God no problem. But when it's Stephen's problems, I feel like I'm trying to convince God that this is actually bigger than something that he can handle.
Wow.
Are you doing that so that you can be okay with it if he doesn't handle it the way you want to?
I don't know.
Is it like
I don't know.
a
I probably need
coping
counseling for
defense
sure.
mechanism?
Yeah.
Same.
I know we got some things we need to work out.
got some issues for
Samantha's
sure.
name issues. Steven's.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
But I feel like I'm almost self-aware of it enough now because it's been so much of a trend in my life that I'm like, Stephen, you're doing it again.
Yeah.
You're doing it again.
That's good.
Yeah. So it's just been it's a fascinating journey with.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that brings to my mind immediately the thought that like at this moment, the disciples are not filled with the Holy Spirit, right? That comes later for them. Whereas we have, so you're increasing
So I've got no
self-awareness.
excuse is what you're saying, yes.
No,
Thank
what
you.
I'm saying is that increasing self-awareness is you're tuned.
Yes,
you're
yes,
now
yes,
more
yes,
in tune
yes.
to the Spirit immediately being like, hey,
Yeah.
that's you're telling the wrong story in your head right now. Whereas they've got some time to get there, so I guess we can give them a little extra grace in this season. As they walk
I think it has been insightful though, because it's like perhaps like the internal struggle that I feel in those moments, perhaps somebody else is feeling that too.
Oh, yeah.
And so like with where I'm almost bargaining with God, perhaps other people might
Yeah,
be bargaining with God
definitely.
too. So rather than trying to make it a clean cut, easy answer, I don't know, maybe it's made me more empathetic. Who knows?
Oh,
But-
that's good. That's never a bad thing.
Yeah.
That's never a bad
Just
thing.
trying to redeem something,
No,
Yeah.
redeem my brokenness.
That's good. Well, that's what Jesus tries to do next. So they've been like back and forth on the lake, getting in and out of the boat, and now he starts them on like this walk north, which I think we forget like just how much walking these guys would have done. Like if they weren't in the boat getting somewhere,
Yeah.
they had to walk, right? So and I read somewhere at one point that like we tend to talk and have better conversations if we're in motion rather than if we're just like sitting like we're doing, but we're doing all right.
We should try and walk and do this.
I know. So I'm fascinated. Like a lot of Jesus teaching that we get recorded is while they're in motion. That's just a thought I had. So sidetrack. But in this case, he asks them two questions, and this is like a hinge point of the whole book of Mark right here in chapter 8. It's like a big deal. They have just come through this like very blind, very deaf season for themselves. Jesus has done these 2 miracles to like highlight for them how blind they've been. And then he's like, hey, who do people say that I am? And then he follows it up with, and who do you say that I am? I feel like question 1 was like the warm up. Like they could answer for somebody else. But then they're like put on the spot to answer for themselves. So just like, how would you answer those 2 questions? So we'll start with the first one. Who do people say that Jesus is?
Yeah, it's crazy. I feel like exactly how as I was reading through that scripture that you shared, with how the disciples were responding, it was just like almost exactly like today in some ways. Like I feel like there's even some religions that think that Jesus is just a prophet, for example. I believe that's the exact words that that one of the disciples used to describe other people was that he's just a prophet. And you can see that in other ways too. Like maybe Jesus was real, people say, but he wasn't the Son of God. So it's just crazy to me that like 2,000 years ago there was like the same types of ideas of what other people thought about Jesus, and maybe some of it was true, and I think a lot of it's true today as well, with what they were saying specifically.
Yeah. That's a really good point, that like some of the answers haven't changed in 2 millennia.
Yeah.
I find myself thinking about it from okay, let's try and put myself back in the first century.
Yeah.
And then, or let's just ask the question, what if Jesus came today? Who would I say he was? Because, you've got the David Koreshis of the world and the cult leaders of the world. Like, I feel like that's where I would go. I feel like that's where my brain would go. Like, here's just another fanatic. Obviously doing stuff that's you can't really deny, but illusion, trickery, whatever, like what would I be, what would the other people, would I be in that group? I feel like I probably would, honestly, as a natural
Skeptic.
Yeah, or cynic. Skeptic, we'll go with skeptic. Yeah. It's a little bit
I mean, it's a
softer,
both and, but
yeah. Cynic, you become a cynic after being a skeptic for a while. But yeah, so that's where that's the tension I feel like when Jesus is looking at the disciples, asking them that question. It would be like, it's not like David Koresh asking that question, but it's essentially like this magnetic figure claiming to be something with a bunch of people that are following him. Like, who does everybody say that I am? And so there was that first century reality where like the Romans are thinking about, Herod's thinking about it, and then you've got the religious leaders thinking about it. There was probably so many answers that were wrapped up in so many emotions as well. That I feel like the question is the same, but maybe the weight of the answer felt a little bit different, and maybe not. But he's actually walking in that moment. So I don't know. I'm just trying to draw out that tension a little bit, like the disciples looking at you and going, "Oh my gosh!" Like, people are really either happy with this guy or really angry at this guy. We're kind of stuck in the middle with this guy. Yeah. So that fascinates me.
He was so strategic when he asked those questions too, because it's like we can rattle off instantly, like what we're hearing from other people, like who they say he is, but like I just picture like the way, like he's just leading up to this idea of like your own heart, like, but who do you say I am? Because I think it's easy. Like I could rattle off, for instance, like maybe in modern times, like friends, family saying like he's a healer, he's a provider, he's gracious. But then when he turns the coin and looks at me and says, "Who do you say I am?" Like, could I say the same things? Which just reflects my heart or like my journey, where it's like, oh, can I? Are you a provider to me? Like, is that who I know you to be? Or is it just like hearsay over here versus the question intends to like provoke me?
Yeah. It's such a strategic question because he's drawing on the emotions of the culture and climate in that moment as people are reflecting and responding to Jesus, and he's pulling them into that. And then he says, well, what about you? Like that's so savvy, right? Talk about being a savvy follower. But
that's a great point. I feel like I've been kind of working through that recently too. Just like when reading through scripture, like I feel like I'm so quick to jump to like what other people are doing. Like, oh yeah, I see this all the time in other people, or I see the church like doing this. I wish they weren't doing that, this, that, and the third, or whatever. But like, yeah, the Lord's been really like doing a work on my heart. Like, how does this apply to you specifically as the reader? Like, it's so easy to point fingers, going back to that whole point again. Like, that's what I'm kind of being convicted by as you guys are talking about that, is just like the whole concept of like others versus ourselves. Wow.
Well, and playing off what all of you guys are saying, there's this moment when you are going to choose, I'm going to love God with my heart, soul, mind, and strength, like he calls me to. And that's like a fully embodied all of me thing. And so at some point we will all have to confront, like, hey, I've been hanging out for a while physically, but where's my heart? Like, where's my mind? Am I mentally giving my assent to this seemingly lunacy? You know, that like some people, I'm sure lunatic came to mind when they're like, who is he? Like, your whole self needs to be in, like, God wants us to worship him and love him and know him fully. And I think at different phases and different times in our lives, we are going to hit walls where it's like some part of me needs to be challenged with who he is, what he's done. And am I in? Like, am I still going to, because Jesus needs them to go all the way.
Yeah.
He's going to need them to watch him die on a cross and still be around 3 days later, you know? And that's like, this is definitely a warm up.
Yeah. And we're getting to that, almost that climax part of Mark where it's like, here we go.
Yeah.
Like, we're on our way to Jerusalem. And it's a one-way ticket for Jesus, you know. I'm not coming back with you guys. And so, and ironically, you know, next week we'll see them thinking that they're getting it, and then, you know, Jesus going, no, get behind me, Satan, you know. Right. And so it's just, it's fascinating as you see what he's trying to draw them in. He's trying to lay that kingdom vision, that foundation that will sustain beyond himself.
Yeah. And that takes time. And so we're like watching them on this journey, and I feel like their journey was actually pretty short, like compared to, thank the Lord, he's given me more than 3 years to like come to grips with who he is. You know what I'm saying?
Because they're like 3 years in almost.
Yeah. Like, they're getting close. It's been a while, but like, it doesn't feel long enough. Feels like it's a long time, but it's not a long time. So I kind of want to pivot, and I do this in the sermon on purpose. It's a deviation from Mark, but it turns to follow then Peter, because Peter's the first to speak up, which he is a lot, and often he's wrong, but this time he like gets it right. He says, you're the Messiah, you're the Christ, right? He doesn't know what that means, really. But at least he answers correctly. But then he, you know, like says some stuff, does some stuff in the book of Acts. We see his letters in 1 Peter. I mean, like, Peter becomes a whole new person, leader, following Jesus, heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so I think in him we see how we develop this kingdom vision, how we see Jesus not only as the fulfillment of all God's promises, but we see in Jesus that the mission, that we're part of God's mission to bring, you know, flourishing and restoration to the whole world. So I gave 4 things in the sermon about developing kingdom vision, that we develop it by faith through the revelation of God in community and gradually, which is like a random word, but I had to pick something there.
You had to put that in there, though. Like, you had
I did.
I'm glad you did.
I don't feel like it happens. I mean, maybe it did for somebody overnight, but certainly not for me. But like, talk about what any piece of that looks like in your life. By faith, through the revelation of God, in community, gradually. Like, where do you see evidence of that in your own life?
The two that I gravitate to the most is through the revelation of God and gradually. I feel like those two would capture my story pretty accurately. So growing up in the church, I feel like Jesus revealed himself to me at the age of 8, captured my heart, but then I rebelled. And there wasn't really, even though I was a leader in the church, and I talked about this in previous podcasts, there was this hypocrisy, this lifestyle where I lived one way and lived a completely different way. And those two worlds really didn't collide at all until God, through his own revelation and conviction of the Spirit, was literally like, you're mine, cut it out, stop it. And then after that, at 19, it was like this gradual, like grace upon grace upon grace upon grace upon heart conversation with God upon grace, you know. And so those are the two that I connect with for sure, the most. I wish I could say it was was in community. I got a taste of that in Wilson as I pastored and learned the value of true biblical community. But yeah, through the revelation of God and God just being very gracious with me.
I love that. That's good. That's good.
I mean, I can see my journey in all those phases. So like, I would say probably a couple years ago, confession session right now, it's very easy for me. Let's just use the term like believing in God for something or as a generic form. It is so easy for me to be like on that faith train for people. And like for myself, it is so hard. And I felt like one day I was just praying and God was like, you have a seeing problem. And it was like of myself, like just vision, like what I can do in your life, or like actually like recognizing, okay, like what are my internal struggles? What do I not see? What is God trying to help me see? And so I think in certain things, I felt God was kind of like leading me into this like internal growth process or different things I was pursuing in life. I think I went by faith, but along the way it was like, sorry, I have phlegm in my throat right now. I know you all don't like that word, but it's right there.
Now everybody's listening to you swallowing.
Sorry. I can feel it. But God just continued to reveal himself. And I think like in that journey, it was like, okay, like this is actually hard for me to have faith sometimes. But then like God comes through in that next piece and he's revealing who he is in his word through different experiences. But also I think like in community, I don't think I would be where I am today without community. Like people being able to point out things I couldn't see in and of myself, or other people to rally behind me when I'm like, I don't have the faith to keep going, where they could actually come in that process. And then, but this has all been a very gradual journey along the way. And I'm a person who loves immediate results, and God is very good to test me in those moments to be like, what are we going to do as like this happens gradually? Is it going to be a faith builder? Is it going to like deconstruct? And so I think for me, I just see how all of those are interwoven together.
Yeah. I mean, I really think that they are. If we start scratching the surface, we see them all. But what about you, Rob? Are any of these like stand out?
Yeah. I mean, that was so well said, actually, just like how those all tie together so easily. Like, wow, I'm blown away by that. But for me, I think the two that really stood out to me were faith and gradually. So honestly, this whole sermon, I was just like, I kept going back to this understanding or revelation of like how patient Jesus is with us. It just kept coming back the whole time, like throughout the healings Jesus was doing and the disciples still not getting it. And I was just like, man, like praise God for him being so patient with us. And I honestly started going down this whole rabbit hole of like, wow, like God is like, that's confirmation right there that God is no humanly father up in the heavens, because no human could ever be that patient with all of us, because we just like on a daily basis, or I can even speak for myself on a daily basis, are falling short. And it was just really humbling just reading through this, and I just got so grateful about just how patient Jesus is and how his grace and mercy just are constantly there for us. And it doesn't happen all right away too. Just the whole gradually thing. It's just like, thank God we don't have to do things right away. Like I feel that a lot. I'm always I just need to get this all done right away. So it was a very comforting and freeing feeling thing for me when I was reading through this, of just like, okay, it's okay. Like Jesus is not on our timeline. He's outside of time and space. He's not worried about, our falling shortness sometimes. So, and then the other thing I wanted to share was like the faith side of things. Like I feel like, just kind of to testify a little bit, over the past year or so, I've been really trying to extend my faith and press. Yeah, I guess extend my faith is what I'm trying to say. But specifically with like prayers and like healing, like talk about healing, like through the disciples and or what we've been seeing Jesus do with all the healings recently. I don't know. I've just been trying to like have more faith in things that I don't think God can necessarily do, but I want to stop putting him in that box. I realized like God started telling me like, I'm not in this box. Like I can do so much more than you can ask, think, or imagine. And so I like for small things, like I would just start praying. Like if I had some sort of injury on my ankle or for example, or whatever, like instead of just going right to like the pain medication or whatever, like I would actually just try praying like in faith and just be like, Lord, like heal my ankle, please. And I was just like pray over my ankle and like, Lord, please just be my healer or whatever, in a step of faith. And sometimes it will get better a lot quicker than I was expecting, and sometimes it wouldn't. But the idea, and sometimes it would require multiple prayers too, which I've kind of noticed, like reading through your sermon, Sarah, that like it wasn't always right away. Like Jesus had to come and like pray multiple times for the same person for the same thing before it was actually healed. So I don't know. I've kind of just noticed that in my own life too. Sometimes, like instead of just being like, yeah, like, okay, that prayer didn't work, let's just move on. Like sometimes I'll be like, is that really faith? If that's the case, I guess sometimes is what I ask myself. Like if something doesn't happen, like that's okay. Like you should still have faith that God's still doing a work somewhere, you know? But anyways, long story short is just like, I've been trying to find those small things to try to have more faith in and just and try praying. And, you know, the faith is still there no matter what, if it happens or not. But like, I've just been being more and more blown away by the things God will actually step into and do when you take those little steps of faith.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah, that's good.
That's great, Rob.
And I feel like you see that in this story. The disciples aren't asking for healing, but you see that stretching of faith. That Jesus starts with the question about what other people are saying, moves to the question about like, who do you say I am? And Peter's answer is correct, but not complete. But Jesus doesn't push him on that.
Right.
He's like, you've got what I need you to have right now. We'll talk more later, right? Like,
Right.
more is coming, but it doesn't need to be all at once. And so I love that, like, his grace, his patience, is all of it, like that all these things are together, but it's a slow unfolding and a building and a growth. And I think what can be hard is that we want to project our own growth on someone else. Like where I am, you all need to join me, or if you're not here, there's something wrong with you. And I think it would serve one another in the church much, much, much better if we would just be able to come alongside and be like in awe at what God's doing in your life without expecting you to be where and understanding what he's doing in my life.
Yeah.
You know, does that make sense?
Yeah,
to you?
yeah, I'd agree with that, and I love that too, because there's this. You know, as we read scripture, it can be a complicated journey, right? So as you delve into the world of preaching and studying more, and you know, learn new theological terms and stuff like that, and people are like, how should you read the Bible? And I think at a very simple and basic level, but yet profound level, is just trying to identify how God and or Jesus reveals himself in every interaction, in every verse, in every situation. And that's really what I love about Mark as well. It was what you were saying first, Rob, is just God's patience with us. And obviously we're pulling out one of those themes, right? The discipleship failure. And we see it time and time and time and time again. And I don't necessarily think the emphasis should be on the failure, but rather the interaction or the response of our God in light of that failure.
Yeah.
Because to focus on the failure is to paralyze ourselves, right? But as we see, I mean, time and time again throughout Mark, there's just failure after failure after failure. I mean, even Syrophoenician women, you know, ending Jesus' parable, and the disciples who's been with him for 3 years can't even understand it and comprehend it. So we just see this failure over and over. But what we see is graciously, this beautiful combination of grace and truth, Jesus committed to these people that he chose, and just being very gentle, but directional with them. Like, I'm going to be gentle with you, but I'm still taking you somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
That's good.
And I love that if we can, at a very basic level, just what's God revealing about himself in this moment, in this interaction, I think we will continually be blown away by how God reveals himself in Scripture, time and time again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
I think that's good. Well, I think we can roll from there and send everybody on their way. But I would love just to challenge people with that question, Stephen, of like, whatever it is that you're reading next, whether you're in the Gospel of Mark or something else, like, how is God revealing himself? What is Jesus saying about who he is? And that goes along with these 4 things of developing kingdom vision by faith through the revelation of God in community and gradually. And is there one of those you need to lean into? Stephen's challenging us on the revelation of God, but Is there something else you need to lean into? I mean, we'd love to, see you at Grace. If you're in the Erie area, you can join us in community this Sunday. But anyway, whoisgrace.com/Mark has all the resources that you need. You can also submit a question there or give feedback if you'd like to interact with us. We love that. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for hanging out. Stephen, thanks for letting 3 guests join you today.
Thanks for filling the chairs, guys.
It was awesome.
It was fun. It was fun. Yep.